Thanks, Megan. Really appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this year's 471 training. Appreciate all of you dropping in and stopping by. To get things started this morning, I just want to do a couple of quick housekeeping kinds of items. Go Soapbox connection will be available for some interactive activity today. The access code is Form 471. There's no space in between that, so it's just straight up Form 471, and that's on your Go Soapbox. The link that you would use, the site that we use during our CIO web, webcasts. Joining me today is a number of folks, our good folks, Megan and Andy, who run our video. As well, I'm also joined by my partner in E-Rate, Caprice Gay, also colleague Rebecca Bright, and also Jody Rose, our KE from Region 1. This being our first 471 training that we're doing online, it's going to be a little bit different, but unfortunately, we don't have the kind of interplay that we normally do when we're present there with you in the same room. So to try and replicate that as best we can, we're going to do a little bit of, I guess I'd call it sort of almost like a podcast kind of approach. Jody and I worked together really well, I thought anyway, during our Form 470 training a couple of months ago. I thought that went kind of well. So we're going to try and do something very similar to that this time around, where he's going to kind of jump in every so often if he sees questions, has any comments that you all share during the Go Soapbox, so that we can try and build in as much interactivity to this as possible. I would encourage you that if you have the opportunity, if you have perhaps two screens, it'd probably be easiest with two screens in front of you, that you can in fact follow along in your own Epic portal and begin your Form 471 if you haven't already. So I would encourage you to do that as we go along. Certainly, we will have this in the long run. We will have this recorded and posted to the KDE Media portal, so you can come back to it and review it at your leisure. One other housekeeping item, and that is just a reminder that tomorrow, from 10 a.m. to noon, and then again on Friday from 1 to 3, we will be holding what we're calling an office hours session for 2 hours each day, each of those 2 days. And it's a Microsoft Teams meeting that is really just going to be a drop-in opportunity for you to just jump in when you have a chance, anytime during those 2 hours. You don't have to be there first thing right away. You can just drop in when it's convenient for you, and then ask any questions that you might have that we don't necessarily perhaps get to, or that you didn't want to share during our session today, that are specific to your application and your situation. That I thought was a really nice follow-up for the Form 470 sessions, and seemed to be a good opportunity for folks to dive into some of their very specific questions that perhaps pertain only to them or just to a very few people. We will be taking a rather broad approach to our examples today. We will run through looking at the practice site. We will run through submitting and certifying a Form 471 for a Category 1 application, and then also for a Category 2 application. So without further ado, I will spare you from having to look at me any further, and I will share my screen so that we can begin demonstrating the Form 471. And Jody, let me know if you can see this.
You're good, Scott.
Great, thank you. All righty, so as you can see, we're looking at the training portal. Obviously, you will want to be logged into your own instance of the Form of Epic, your district's portal. When you log in, you will be dropped into your landing page, and this is what you will see. It'll probably be a little bit smaller and slightly more condensed, but essentially you're seeing exactly the same thing that you would see in your Epic portal. To begin a Form 471, you want to click on the link in the list of links at the upper right-hand portion of the page. Click on the link that says Form 471, and this will begin a new form. So we'll click on that. And the first thing we do is we enter a nickname. It didn't drop me quite to the top of the page, but here it's just asking for a name that you're going to give this this particular form. So we might say District 1 471. It's going to be a name that you want to use that will help you remember what that particular Form 471 contains. Remember that as we go along, you will only be able to select either Category 1 or Category 2, so that may be something that might be helpful for you to add in the nickname. But you add your nickname, whatever you choose to name it, and click Save and Continue. And it's going to ask you about your contact information. If you are the main contact person on your Form 471, you would say yes here. If you want it to be somebody else, you would say no. If you choose to say no, it's going to ask you to search for that main contact person. They will need to be an Epic user. So if you have not added that person as an Epic user, it will be necessary to do so before you can add them as the main contact form or for this particular Form 471. In this case, I'm just going to say yes. You note that it drops the information in immediately off to the right, and then it asks you about your summer and holiday contact information. Anything that you might be able to share here with respect to your summer or holiday availability, I would recommend that you add that here. If you are normally out of the office, not working for any period over the summer, whether it's July or whenever it might be, I would certainly encourage you to add that information here because otherwise you may they may reach out to you, USAC might, for additional information. And if you're not available, you could miss the request and then be in a position where you may have to go through the appeals process just to get your application reviewed and approved. So to avoid that, make sure that you include any summer or holiday contact information here.
Scott, can I jump in for just a second?
Please do.
Well, I know I've recommended some of my districts to put their cell number in there just because if for whatever reason they put you in the deferral, and you might talk about what it means to be put in deferral, I felt like it was a chance for districts to let you know, like, I absolutely am available. Please contact me so that we can get through the review process.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That the deferral period, oftentimes, well, every year, USAC will start a summer deferral period, and if you've indicated that, allegedly, if you've indicated that you are unavailable during that time, they will defer asking you PIA questions, for example. They'll defer that during that summer period. It's usually from, I think it's early June or late May up through about the 1st of September. Gives folks a window where they basically get some grace from having to reply and then having their applications rejected because there was a lack of reply for questions. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. That can, there's sometimes on USAC's part, unfortunately, a little bit of confusion from time to time on that. But certainly, yeah, putting your cell number in here is not a bad idea. To make sure that if they do attempt to reach out to you, that they can reach you in the most direct fashion. So we'll save and continue from our contact information. Now we're going to, it's being asked whether or not this particular Form 471 is for a Category 1 or Category 2 set of services. This is going to be a choose it once and make sure you've chosen correctly now, because you won't really be able to come back and edit this later. You will also be stuck with the one or the other, as I mentioned, because you can only choose Category 1 or Category 2, unlike the Form 470 where you can do both. You cannot do both on a Form 471. So we're going to run through a Category 1 to start with. So we'll click Category 1, and we will save and continue. There you will find that save and continue is a favorite. And I apologize for having to repeat myself as many times, but that's just kind of the way things are. So the first page that comes up after you move on from that is just some basic information about the entity, your district. It lists the district name, the urban-rural status, and some additional information with regards to the district, and then the total number of students, any endowment information, which I don't think will be relevant for anybody at this point. It's really just a simple review it, does everything look correct, and then move on kind of thing. This is not, there's really not anything that you're going to edit on this particular page. So we'll quickly move on and continue. Now we're going to get a similar page with the details of individual buildings and entities within the district. You'll note that this includes student percentages in CEP or NSLP. The information then is available to you. This should match up with all of that discount data that you have just so diligently worked on and sent to us. And by the way, thank you very, very much for everybody working on that and getting that to us as quickly as you all have. I think we're down to just a handful now that we haven't received. So I really do appreciate your timely returning that to us. So again, it's just a review kind of page. If anything stands out to you as being incorrect, you probably will not be able to change this at this point. What you'll need to do is during the PIA review process, you will need to reach out to your reviewer and make mention to them that you identified an error in one of your building profiles, and then tell them what you want that changed to. They should be able to change that during the PIA process, so you won't have to, you can't at this point go in and edit that yourself because the administrative window has closed. So you review, you're happy with what you see there, you move on, save and continue. And then certainly last but not least is a breakdown, a full breakdown of your NSLP and CEP and discount data. If you want to see the details, you can click on Show Entities, and it breaks it down for you in terms of how you have it entered currently in EPIC. You can see that in this case we have one of our schools that's CEP, one that is not, and then the details as far as enrollment and NSLP eligible. Again, if you see something wrong, you want to make note of it and contact your PIA reviewer to have them correct that. If you do have something that needs correcting, and I would ask that you please make sure that if there is a correction that needs to be made here, that you also take a quick look at your discount data sheet and make sure that a correction is or isn't necessary on it as well. If it is, make the change and please send us the updated version so that we have the latest and greatest from you. Alrighty, moving on. We'll finally get into the meat of our Forms 471. So we can finally start making our funding requests. Excuse me, we will start by adding a funding request. This is going to basically be the bones, if you will, of this particular funding request. We will start with the funding request nickname. We're going to say C1 fiber. We're going to do a least lit fiber example. The least dark fiber is very, very similar to the least lit fiber in terms of the specifics in terms of what you click on. I'm not going to get into the self-provisioned fiber today. Certainly, I would encourage you that if you have questions about that, drop in tomorrow or on Friday, and we can walk you through some of the more specific stuff that deals just with self-provisioned fiber. It's a little bit more complicated in terms of the requirements within the Form 471, and also since it is not, it doesn't pertain to most of you at this point. We'll try and cover the things that do rather than don't at this point. So, is this funding request a continuation of an FRN from a previous year? In 99.9% of the cases, you would say no here. Do you want to copy an FRN? Now, this is a really helpful feature in that it allows you to go back and select an FRN from a different, well, from a number of different things. One is you could copy an FRN from within this Form 471. You can set up an FRN, for example, the way we do our state application. We set up an FRN for each month of service. Now, most of you won't be doing that, but you might have a previous year where you've got an FRN that is very, very similar. Or you've put one in perhaps on the Cat 2 side, and you want to just copy it and make just some small changes to it. Maybe your two different models of switches. You can use this function to take an old FRN and bring in the data from that, and it will be replicated exactly as it was. So just be aware that if you use this copy FRN function, it's going to ask you for the FRN number. You would enter the FRN number, and or you can search. Yeah, you can search by Form 471 or FRN number. You would type it in. You'd click search, and then it will bring the list of matches that it's found in terms of FRNs. If you put in the Form 471 number, it will bring up all of the FRNs on that Form 471. If you search by FRN number, it will just bring up that one FRN that matches, presumably that matches what you have entered. I'm going to click back here. But be aware that once that FRN copies, you will need to make sure that A, everything copied over, B, that it copied over correctly, and C, if you have any changes that you need to make. For example, you might use last year's FRN for your for the cost of your monthly cost for your fiber connection, but the taxes have changed. So you'll need to change the line item and the details of that line item associated with those taxes. So just be aware that if there are any differences between the one that you're copying over and the one that you're creating new, any adjustments that need to be made to that copied FRN, that you need to go in and do that. All right, so we'll leave that as is, and we won't use a copy function right now. You only have one, having previously selected the category 1, you will only have one option in this drop-down menu. It is data transmission and or internet access. So you click that in the drop-down and click continue. I thought I had... Oh, clicking on the copy FRN when we came back, that got unchecked. There are little things like that that occur in Epic all over the place that you just have to be aware of, unfortunately. Sometimes you just need to look around a little bit to find what might have happened, or why you're a little extra scrolling just to see if you've missed something or something has changed. All right, so how are the services for this FRN being purchased? In the vast majority of cases, you would say contract, but I know that some of you have some month-to-month, so you would select month-to-month in those instances. We're going to go with the contract as this example since it is the most common. And then we will continue. Now we're going to associate a contract. You can associate a contract which you should have entered already into your contracts module. Now that having been said, I think what we'll do is we will get through this, and then I'm going to drop out of this and come back to it, and we'll show you where to enter your contract information if you haven't already done so. But you can search by your building entity or your build entity number for the district here, and it will pull up a list of all of your existing contracts. So if I click search, you can see then I start getting my search results. It kicks back. You can see that we have 15 different contracts that we have entered at some point during the course of using this. You can click on the checkbox next to the associated contract or the contract that you need to associate to this Form 471. Notice that they only show up in increments of 5, so you may need to use your back or forward arrows in order to find the correct listing if you have more than 5 contracts already in your contracts module. So drop out of that.
And Scott, to your point, if you get to this stage and you're entering your 471 and you realize, my goodness, I forgot to enter my contract, you're pretty much saving and getting out and then going and entering the contract, right? There's no way to enter it at this point, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. You would really probably have to just back out of creating this shell of the FRN, the one without all of the line item details. And then, yeah, you'd back out of this and then you'd save the Form 471, and we'll show you that here in just a second. I am going to go ahead and associate a contract now so that we can move on, but I'll do that here in just a second. It's a good point. So I click on my contract that I want to associate with this Form 471. You notice that when I click on the checkbox, what it does is it brings down some details regarding that particular contract. It shows you the service provider, extensions, account numbers, contract numbers, the award date, et cetera, et cetera. Then it's going to ask you for the service start date. This is going to be auto-populated with 7/1/21. I would recommend you leave it that way, especially for full year services. That would be the best way to go about it. You would also leave that as 7/1/21, even in the category 2 for all but the most unusual of cases, so that you will have the ability to get started right on the 1st of July. And then we have the contract expiration date. It defaults to the current date, and then we can go to June 30th. And just presuming that you have a 1-year contract, you would put the end date of the contract. Obviously, if that's a couple farther years out, you'll need to navigate yourself to that contract end date. For the current term, too, notice that that does say current term of the contract. So if you are in a contract that has a 3-year contract with 3 1-year renewals, and you're in your first year of renewal, then your contract expiration date will be the end, or should be the end of that of this particular upcoming funding year. If, however, let's say that you're in the first year of a 3-year contract, then this wouldn't be 22, it would end up being 25. We will continue. And then it's going to ask us whether or not we have any kind of special construction, maintenance and operations, or network equipment under this particular funding request. We can certainly come back and if folks would like it, we can certainly come back and give an example of this. That's not a problem at all. But for now, I'm going to mark no on this. But obviously, if you are looking for networking equipment under Category 1, you would say yes here. If you are looking for maintenance and operations to cover your self-provisioned fiber, you would say yes here. If you have one-time charges associated with a new contract, you've got a new building, for example, and you're having to, your provider is going to have to build out a connection to that new building. In those instances, you'll probably have some special construction costs. You would say yes to that here as well, so that you can then begin to ask, or excuse me, to answer the questions that they will have regarding those services. You'll see that they do have some notes for you about what to select and under what circumstances. And then if you say yes, there's some additional information that's going to ask whether it's for lit fiber, dark fiber, self-provisioned, or wireless. If you say no, then that just goes away. We can come back to that if there is interest and demand for that. And Jody, you can let me know if anybody says they would really like to take a look at that. So I click continue, and it moves me on to the last section about this particular funding request. And this is asking for a narrative. So you're just going to briefly describe the services that you're requesting, and perhaps a little bit of who's getting what. In other words, fiber connections to all rooms in the district. Transport only access. In most cases, I think you all, in fact, I'm not even sure, I'm not aware of anybody who has need for the internet access in between their buildings. So that's why I put that transport only, no internet access as a part of the example. But it doesn't have to be particularly for the narrative on a fiber connection. You don't have to be overly flowery in your descriptions. It's pretty straightforward. Where it does help to have a little bit more of an explanation might be, for example, where we're dealing with asking for Category 1 special construction or network components, things of that. Just to make it clear that, in fact, you are, that location or the locations in question are, in fact, eligible to receive those services under Category 1. So you'll have a brief description of your services that are contained in this Form 471.
Scott, if I may?
Yes, please.
Well, I was going to remind everyone that we do have the Go Soapbox going. It's just the app.gosoapbox.com, and the code is Form 471, no spaces. Not a ton of activity yet. We did get one question that I didn't catch until we moved on past the screen, though. So before we got too far afield, I thought I would maybe go back and hit that just to let you clarify.
Sure.
You very quickly, when you were getting off one of the early screens, just said, no, this is not a continuation of a previous FRN. So the question, obviously, is if I'm in, say, the second or third year of a multi-year fiber contract, is it okay to click yes that it is a continuation of a previous FRN? What circumstances might I say yes, this is a continuation of a previous FRN?
Normally, the yes answer to that has been associated, in my experience, and it's been limited, to be perfectly honest, has been when there's still ongoing work on an FRN that you had requested in a previous year. Those are the only circumstances where I've seen that continuation checked as a yes. If you are starting a new year afresh with services that, you're not really continuing services from last year, except in a sense. Let me back up. In the sense that you and I would be speaking to one another, yes, we're continuing on, and I get that. But the actual funding request is not being carried forward because it's a new year of service. So in the vast majority of cases, you would say, no, this is not a continuation because you're starting a fresh new year. Even though it's under the same contract, it's a new year of services, and so it's not carrying forward anything that had previously already been started.
Thanks. I will say that I've had one or two probably click yes, and I've not seen that really be the end of the world. To be perfectly frank, I'm not sure, what criteria they use to go back and check that. And my glass half full approach has been, well, maybe they'll review you less if they think this is mid filing of a multi-year contract, and they know that, okay, well, last year's was the year we really analyzed the bid process, and this is just continuation of the filing. You know, you could talk me into clicking yes in that example, but to Scott's point, I mean, it is a new year of service, and I could also argue that it's a new FRN and a new 12-month period, so to speak. But.
Yeah, exactly. And you raised a good point, Jody, that I've not experienced or seen or observed, not only in Kentucky but really anywhere, where that particular selection has resulted in some sort of catastrophic, irreparable damage. In fact, I've not even seen it lead to any kind of appeal type situation either. So. You know, they might, if you were to click it off and your reviewer were to notice it, they might come back to you and ask you for clarification about it. You'd provide them with the response, whatever the situation is, and then oftentimes, if your PIA reviewer feels like it should have been checked, then they'll tell you that they're going to make that modification, and they'll make that modification for you. Alrighty, and Jody, please feel free to jump in as you did there as we go forward. I do want to make sure that we're addressing as many questions as possible.
No, yeah, we're caught up right now, and honestly, Scott, to your point, I mean, I think the theme this year with us being so virtual is that we want to show that we're available. I think that's why you're doing the office hours for the next 2 days. I would also note, and I know you and I have had to do this, where you know, if you've got a situation that you just feel like you need to schedule some time outside of anything we have previously scheduled, we can absolutely work out a time to have a one-on-one situation. I know a lot of these on the Form 471s gets very specific to your circumstances. And, you know, while we're not the ones giving out and taking back the funding, we can certainly just try to provide, you know, some guidance as best we can based on what, you know, we feel like USAC is ruling and explaining to us. So,
sure.
So you're caught up on questions right now.
Excellent. And also to that same effect, Jody, and that's really good. I appreciate your sharing that. The vast majority of days, if you see the little green dot next to my name in Microsoft Teams, you should be able to look me up. And in most cases, unless I'm either distracted or in some other sort of session, which should be showing me as being busy. If you see that little green dot, you should be able to ping me, and if I've turned up my volume and noticed that I'm being pinged, I'm available via Teams most of the time. So don't feel like you have to even necessarily schedule a time. If you happen to be in the middle of something and just want to say, oh, I got a quick question, let me see if Scott's available. Feel free. Don't feel like you even need to go through the process of scheduling anything. I mean, it's the same kind of thing where you can pick up the phone and do the same thing. I find that the Teams to be a little bit more conducive only because sometimes when we do run into some questions, it oftentimes helps me if you can share your screen with me, which obviously is difficult over the old-fashioned phone. But now that we're all sort of living in the pre-Jetsons world, we can see each other and see each other's information on each other's screens, so that it really makes it very easy for me to watch what you are doing and then identify, okay, here you might want to do this, or if you uncheck this, it will allow you to, sometimes I get a lot of questions about sometimes about the quirkiness of Epic, as much as sometimes I get the kinds of detailed questions in terms of what do I answer, just because, well, like I said, Epic is kind of quirky. So being able to see what it is you're doing can really provide me with a quick way of being able to provide you with the answers that you need so that you can move on. All right, so we've entered our information on the narrative, and we're going to then save this, and it will take us to our list of FRNs. We have created the first one. Now, we need, you may have noted that we did not enter any information about money. obviously we haven't finished this funding request. We have just built the skeleton, and now we need to put some meat on the bones. So we are going to click on the number that has been assigned to this particular funding request. Clicking the checkbox and then clicking edit is only going to take you, is only going to take you back into the skeleton and not the meat. It does look like this, actually, the manage FRN line items, I believe, has been added. It used to be only these. This might actually do the trick. Yep, okay, it did. I'm gonna click the back button there just so that everybody gets a chance to see that. That's a new button that's been added. It used to be that you just had to magically know that the only way to get to adding line items was to click on the number. If you click on the number, it does the same thing as if you click the check mark and then click manage FRN line items. So it's really a 6 of one, half a dozen the other. You don't have to magically figure it out. There's a little bit more guidance to it now. All right, so we are going to start adding line items to our funding request. So we will click Add New FRN Line Item. And with this in mind, we'll remember that we are asking for funding for our Category 1 least lit fiber connections. So the first question we have is the purpose of the connections. Is this purpose internet access service that includes a connection from any applicant site directly to the ISP? The answer for, I think, probably 98, 99, maybe even 100% of you would be no, because you are not linking directly to the internet service provider. You are linking back to your hub site or linking a separate building back to your hub site, your Ken Connection hub site. So that is not the case. Is it a data connection between 2 or more sites entirely within your network? That is true, so we will click that. Numbers 3 and 4, data connection for an applicant's hub site to an ISP. Obviously, again, we're not to an ISP. It is to a let's see, data connections for an applicant's hub site. Oh, that's the hub site. That would be the last mile connection. That also does not apply. That's the connection. That's the Ken connection that the state network provides for you. And then this last one, is it for internet access service with no circuit? That is not the case for you either. So you will click the second one, and of course you only have one option with these being radio buttons. So I cannot think of anybody and any application I've ever seen in the state of Kentucky that has been anything other than this second item. The function, and I don't know why they call it function, because it's really a question of the medium. You know, how are you delivering that connectivity? You're delivering it by our fiber, copper, wireless, other, or miscellaneous. In our example, we're dealing with fiber, so we will select fiber. Then it's going to ask you for the type of connection. You can see that we have all sorts of different options: DSs, OCs, we have dark fiber, we have switched multi-megabit service, there's DSL, Ethernet, MPLS. I think most of you probably would either be dealing with Ethernet or perhaps a switched multi-megabit data service. If you do not know for certain, we are obviously now to the Form 471 portion of the E-rate process, and you are allowed, and in fact you would be encouraged, to check with your service provider to make sure that you are entering the correct type of connection here in this drop-down menu. You can't, well, you can, but you shouldn't. You should not be consulting your service or any service providers as you develop your Forms 470. So just be aware that, you know, if you're still going out to bid, you shouldn't be speaking to your service providers ahead of putting out your Form 470 and selecting a winner. Once you do select a winner, however, they are allowed to and permitted to and encouraged to support you in your application process. So at this stage of the game, you are able to and allowed to do exactly that and check with them to find out whether or not you've got the correct information that you're entering about the services that they are going to provide you. So with those two drop-down menus filled, we'll move on, save and continue. It's going to ask us the download speed in a least lit situation. You should know right off the top of your head what speed that they are going to provide for you. I've noticed that it's really very common these days for folks to have 10 gig connections between their buildings. If it's slower than that, you can put in that it's slower than that. You can put in that it's faster than that. You just want to make sure that what you are entering is in fact correct. Note also that I entered this only once, and then the upload and the upload and speed and units the speed and units for upload are automatically entered into that for you. The reason for that is that I had on the previous screen selected Ethernet, and Ethernet is full duplex, so you have same speeds up and down. If you selected something that is not a full duplex, then you would have the ability to enter separate speeds for your upload and download. Is this burstable bandwidth? Yes or no? It's a simple yes or no question. If you say yes, it was going to ask you up to what speed and what units. If you say no, then obviously nothing will be there. Now, with respect to that burstable bandwidth, basically what this is asking is, does the service that's going to be provided to you have the capability to give you a little bit more headroom when you start to bump your head, for example, on these 10 gigs. So if I was trying to, if my demand was jumping above that 10 gigs for that moment when it occurs, does my connection allow me to jump up to, say, 12 or 15 or some other speed? I would certainly enter that as well, and then select the units as well. So if you are not certain as to whether or not you have burstable bandwidth, again, a quick conversation with your service provider should give you the answer to that question.
And if you don't know, you probably don't have, because most of the time your provider is going to sell that as a benefit of something that they're offering you, right? Is the fact that, oh, if you actually reach your cap, that it goes a little faster. And so if nobody's ever told you about that, or it wasn't part of your proposal, you probably don't have burstable bandwidth.
True enough. All right, so some additional questions regarding this connection. Is this a direct connection to a single school, library, or NIF for internet access? These are the key words here: for internet access. You are not getting internet access through the connections that link your buildings within your WAN. So the answer to this is no. Is this a connection between eligible schools, libraries, and non-instructional facilities that provides a wide area network? And in this case, the answer there is yes. Does this include firewall services? It may not. If it does, obviously you're going to want to say yes. If it does not, you're going to want to say no. Once again, as Jody sort of alluded to there, it's one of those things you'll probably know that because as he points out, you're likely to have been sold on that a little bit. I don't understand why that would even occur in between buildings, but hey, I don't design the networks and I don't know all that much about them. So I suppose it is possible that there might be firewall services on your least lit lines. I think in most cases you're going to be saying no here. But obviously you'll want to be aware one way or another and then answer that particular question accurately. So save and continue, and now we're finally to the biceps and quads here of our putting meat on the bones. We're being asked for a monthly recurring cost. Let's see, we said we got 10 gig connections. I don't know, that might be what, $7, $8, couple $100. I don't know. What's common, Jody? Do you know?
Let's just say that you're paying $1,500 a month.
100. All righty. So there's $1,500 a month in monthly recurring unit ineligible costs. If you have any cost allocation that you need to do, because some of these services, let's say, for example, you're delivering a connection that goes out to an elementary school, and that elementary school has some pre-K in it, and so you have to do a little bit of cost allocation. You can do your cost allocation calculations outside of Epic here, and then just determine the monthly amount that needs to be allocated out of that cost. And let's just say that it's 1%, so we'll just go with $15. How you determine the ineligible costs as far as that cost allocation is concerned is up to you, as long as the criteria that you are using is somehow based in reality. So you might use the number of students, you might use the number of drops, you might allocate based on the amount of service that goes to those particular the pre-K related classrooms, or the end user devices that are assigned to pre-K. So it really just depends upon what you choose, and obviously you will want to choose the criteria that leads you to a relatively small cost allocation, simply because in most cases there's probably not a whole lot of work that's being done or use that's being done from those in those pre-K types of situations. Same kind of thing would also apply to a high school with an adult ed program. So you just need to be aware that there may be circumstances that require you to do a cost allocation. One thing that I'm going to note here while we're here and we're talking about cost allocations, it's worthy of mentioning that obviously if you put in a monthly recurring ineligible cost, you're doing that cost allocation, you're probably going to have a unique cost allocation for each individual building that you're doing a cost allocation for. It's probably, even if you have multiple elementary schools and each of those elementary schools has a pre-K, which they may or may not, for each one that has a unique cost allocation, you'll need to do a separate line item for each of those locations. Because if you try to do the ineligible, you try to do that cost allocation, if you put in your monthly quantity, and that's the total number of connections that you have here, if you say you've got 8 buildings in your district and only 2 of them have a cost allocation, if you put in 8 here and you don't do separate line items for those, you're going to get a cost allocation that comes out of each of those lines, but only 2 of your buildings really ought to be having that cost allocation occur. So the way around that sticky sort of issue and that costly issue is to create a separate line item for each building that has a cost allocation. You will also need to, and we'll talk about this here in a minute, is that if you have multiple buildings in your district and there are different speeds that go to those buildings. Let's say that, for example, you've got a high school, middle school, and 2 elementaries. The 2 elementaries get a 500 meg connection. the middle school has a 1 gig connection and the high school has a 2 gig connection. You can do those elementary schools together, assuming that the cost is the same. You can do those 2 elementary schools together. If they both have preschool, then you might need to do them separately because they have different cost allocations. But you will need to do at least a separate line item for those 2 elementary schools because they have the same speed that and cost associated with that connection. The middle school would be its own separate line item because it has a separate speed and a different cost associated with it, and then the high school would be the same. So how you end up structuring all of these line items depends upon a number of different factors, including the different speeds and different costs and any cost allocations that may need to be done with respect to those services being delivered to those locations. So you notice that once I put the quantity in, it does the automatic calculation for you. I'll just change that back because I think we only had 3 in this example. And actually this is going to be just 1 because we're only having 1, and we'll show you that other, how we can do this elsewhere. So we're going to have 1 at this cost with this particular cost allocation, and then we're done on the monthly cost side. I know of literally no situations where you would have one-time costs and the monthly costs on the same line item, but this sort of little module here populates with both no matter what. You will not, though, if you try and save and continue, you'll note that it just pops you back up to the top and says, hey, you left these blank. So you do have to come back in here and put in zeros and let it then calculate that last one for you. So just be aware that if you can't figure out why it is that it won't let you move on, scroll back up and enter zeros for your one-time costs before you move on. And then it's going to ask you for the recipients of service. Is every entity for this organization receiving service? We're going to say no here because the example we gave was just for 1 connection. I can then either search for the entity numbers, I can search by entity name, or I can just use the list below and I will select the one to which this applies. I will click that one there, and then I will add this as the recipient of service for this line item. You'll notice that once I select it and click add, it gets dropped into this list of selected entities, and then I can move on. And then it's basically just are you sure this is what you want? It's the old, are you sure you want to delete? Well, you're not actually deleting, but, it's, are you certain this is what you want? Yes, it's what I want. So you double check it on this particular page and then move on. And I think, yeah, we'll go back, and we're now back to our list of funding request line items. To add additional ones to this list, obviously, you're just going to click that add additional. So there's our data connection, fiber. I said Ethernet on the last one, so we'll keep that consistent. Speeds, let's see, I said 10 on this one. I want to say 2 gig on this one. Just for the sake of the example, we'll say yes, just for giggles and grins, and we'll say 3. Probably won't be 3 just because I don't think that the electronics like odd numbers. Somebody in the other than 1, I suppose. And then we're back to our questions about the connection. It is not for internet access. It is for a wide area network. Does not include firewall services. Continue. Now we're back to our monthly cost. This one might be cheaper, so we'll say this is $1,000. We have 0 on this cost allocation because this is a middle school, and actually we'll say this is the middle school and that non-instructional facility. So there'll be 2 quantity on this one. Does the calculations for you on the left side. Make sure you enter zeros on the right side. And then save and continue. Is this for every entity? No, it is not. We did A before, so we'll do B and the non-instructional facility, and we will add. They have been dropped into the selected entities. Scroll further down, move on. Are you sure? Yeah, those are the 2 that I selected, and those are the ones I want. Save and continue, and we're back to our line items. Jody, how are we looking in terms of questions at this point?
We're still caught up. I mean, it's one of those things. It's tough to get into specific questions unless you hit like an actual line item that triggers a thought from someone. So,
sure.
Yeah. So limited activity on Go Soapbox, which is fine. I mean, we've got that's why we're going through these.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Appreciate it. All right. So we'll just assume that at this point we've covered the 3 buildings that we need to for this particular example in this district. So this funding request is complete. We will save and continue. So we've got all of our FRN line items. Now we're back to the list of funding requests. If we had additional funding requests, we could add an FRN. And it takes us back to, let's, for example, if you were looking for category 1 networking equipment, core router. Is it a continuation? Probably not. We're not going to copy it because this is going to be a brand new one. It is for data transmission or internet access. Save and continue. It is from contract. We will continue. Oh, you know what I did not do? Let me back this out. Before we get into this, let me do that. Yeah, let me cancel. Yes. Okay, so we're back to our funding requests. So we're gonna do all right, we should be good to go now. I would say it's going to move review. We're not ready to review quite yet. All right, so we have saved up to this point. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through that contracts module so that those of you who may have new contracts can see where and how you enter that information. We're going to click News. The reason I click News is because it takes me to a page where there's a logo. And so every time you click the logo, that'll take you back to your landing page. Let's see.
I almost had you, Scott. I was going to call PI review and see why you were having a core router on a least lit fiber connection, but then you backed out of it. So I guess you passed whatever test was going on.
Watching me as we go, huh? Okay, so what I did there, if you didn't catch that, from the landing page, I click on the text, the name of the district in the welcome text. So I click on the name of the district, and then it takes me to summary information of the district overall. You'll note that I have these tabs across the top. The one over here, the 6th or 7th one there is the contracts. If I click on that, it will take me to the list of contracts that we have already created. If I want to add a contract, I'm going to click Manage Contracts. So once we get to here, then it will allow me to click to add a new one. So it's going to ask you, what kind of contract are you asking for here? This is, if I want my submitted contracts, it's going to keep that list. If I want my draft contracts, You can see that we've started a few of them here, but not completely finished them. So this is how you can, if you've got one that you started and you didn't finish, but you need to come back and finish it, using this drop-down menu will allow you to select whether it's a previously submitted one or whether it is one that you are still working on. If, on the other hand, you are starting afresh and you need to enter a new contract, scroll down to the bottom and click on Add a New Contract. Some of this actually is easy to figure out, although I did say some of this. Enter a nickname to easily identify this contract. So this might be your leased lit fiber contract service provider, Bob's. And we'll put the year in it, 2021 through 2024. So it's a 3-year contract. I just put those dates in there so that I know that, again, this is one of those things where I can name it whatever I want. And in doing so, I should probably name it something that's at least specific enough for me so that when I am actually entering my information in my funding requests, I can easily find and identify that, yes, this is the contract I'm looking for. If the contract has a contract number, you would enter it here. If you have just an account number with your service provider, you can enter that account number here. The other option that you could enter here might be if you can't find either of those other things, would be a district phone number. Any of those really will do for this contract number. It just depends upon whether one is assigned by your service provider or not. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we'll enter our contract number and then we will move on. And here we have the option to upload contract documents, including a description of each document. Would you like to upload a copy of your contract? I can tell you right now that if you don't upload a copy of the contract at this point, if the contract has never been reviewed previously, which it probably won't be because this is a new instance of a contract, that you are in all likelihood going to be asked for a copy of the contract. So you can skip that step in PIA if you upload a copy of the contract right here, right now. You don't have to. Just be aware that if you don't, you will more than likely be asked for it at a later date. Personally, I'm kind of the opinion that it's easy enough and convenient enough to just go ahead and upload a copy right here, right now, while you're here, so to save you the time and energy and the headache of dealing with a PIA reviewer about this particular issue anyway. So this is a copy of the contract. If you had a different one, just throw this one down here as well. If you had this might be something along those lines. You might have a secondary a document that might be like, for example, a supplemental pricing sheet that would be associated with your contract. You can enter that one as well. Certainly would encourage you to do that if you're going to upload a copy of the contract. If you've got any additional or appendices or things like that that are associated with the contract, make sure that you enter all of them here if you're going to. You'll note that if you realize at some point you uploaded the wrong document, you can always come back and hover over with your mouse on the document image and it turns into an X. If you click that X, you can see that it immediately deletes the document that you had placed there. Notice that it immediately deletes that. It does not say, are you sure you want to delete it? So once you do click the X, it is gone. You'll have to you'll have to upload again if it was removed by mistake. So there's that. We'll save and continue. So now we're going to get into some of the meat of this contract. Is it based on a state master contract? In most cases, the answer to that is going to be no. We'll get into that question a little bit deeper when we look at the Category 2 option in just a minute. Is this contract based on a multiple award schedule? Also, you'd probably be saying no. The only time you're going to be doing multiple award schedules is probably going to be with the state contract, where multiple vendors are selected, and then you all choose from those multiple vendors. So, unless you're doing something really unusual, you all will be answering no to that second question pretty consistently. We'll save and continue. Can other applicants piggyback off this contract? Again, vast majority of the times you're going to be saying no. And then, was this contract created by another applicant and then you piggybacked off their contract? You would be saying no to this as well, unless by some strange situation it was. But in the vast majority of cases, you're going to be saying no to both of those questions. Save and continue. Was an FCC Form 470 posted for the product and or services you are requesting? Of course there was. Why would I be doing this if I didn't file a Form 470? Was your Form 470 posted prior to funding year 2016? We're going to say no for the ease of dealing with this. But if in fact it had been posted, if you're in, for example, a 10-year contract for your services, you would say yes in this instance, and then it's going to ask you for the Form 470 number because the EPIC system isn't able to talk to the old Bessie system that has the old Form 470 in it. So you just need to make sure that you enter the Form 470 number if in fact that's the case. Newer contracts, if you're entering new contracts, would be based on a more recent Form 470. So I can't imagine that in all but the most unusual cases, you would be saying yes to that. How many bids were received? Let's just say, for example, we had 3. If you only had 1, which may occur, particularly in the least lit fiber and even in the dark fiber options, I know that many of you in your districts really don't have but one option for services in your local area anyway. So in fact, you may only have 1, and you can certainly put that. There's nothing wrong with being accurate about how many bids you received. Quick note on that. And this is a little bit more from the 470 side than the 471 side, but nonetheless still important. And that is if you only receive 1 bid, I encourage you to make note of that in an email to yourself before you start your bid evaluations, just to document the fact that as of the close of the Form 470 28-day waiting period and the beginning of your reviewing the bids, that you only received 1. An email to yourself and an electronic copy of that should be sufficient should you be asked for any documentation regarding having only received 1 bid. And then it's going to ask us to search for the Form 470. We will search. Notice that it automatically enters the build entity number so that you can just click search, and it will bring up your list of all of the Forms 470 that you have entered so far. We'll go ahead and do that one just because it's a little bit more recent. We are obviously well past our allowable contract date, which is a good thing. You want to make sure that that's the case. If you are not past your allowable contract date, you should not be entering these kinds of details about your contract because you technically shouldn't have one yet. All right, so I've checked off the one that I want. Move on, save and continue. Here's the account number again. You can see that it's a billed telephone, also suggests a billed telephone number. Again, your contract at the top, I would think, would likely have a contract number if your service provider entered one, but they may not have created one, so you can use that billed phone number as well if that is what you have available to you. So, and then we're going to select the service provider. Boy, do I even remember what we have here? Zach. There we go. Good. So you can search by the service provider identification number, or you can search by the service provider name. Either one should return you at least a short list of potential matches. I just entered USAC because we're in the practice site. I'm going to select that first one being as our service provider. I click the checkbox and then save and continue. Is it a multi-year contract? Oftentimes, your least lit fiber contracts or your dark fiber contracts are going to be multi-year. You would click yes, and then select. This is the date that you awarded your contract. So this is the date that must be at least 28 days after you posted your Form 470. Ours was like a year ago, or 2 years ago, so we're good to go as far as that's concerned. But it's going to be essentially any date any date after the Form 470 28-day waiting period is over, and probably either the day, if you're creating it, this instance of your contract the day of your award, it would be the day that you are actually doing it, so it would be that current date.
I know in some cases in the past, I've told districts that if your board's going to take action and accept the winning provider, that the date of that board meeting where you're going to have board minutes to back that up, that might be the date that you would put in that the contract was technically awarded, because that's when the board voted to go with that provider for that service.
Good advice. Very good advice. Thank you. Save and continue. So we have questions about voluntary contracts. Does it include voluntary extensions? Excuse me. Yes, it does. What is the extra contract expiration date if all extensions are exercised? Well, we just go way out in the future real quick here, and we'll just say June 30th of 2024. How many extensions are left on the contract? Oh, let's just say 2. It's a 2-year contract with 2 extensions, or with 1 year contract with 2 extensions. How many extensions are remaining? What's the total remaining in months? You could either say 24, or if you want to do this, and I've never honestly seen this be an issue, but if you wanted to, you'd say, all right, well, right now we're still in January, so we're close to that. We're almost close to the end of January, so we'll just call it end of January to end of June. That would be 5 extra months, so extensions 2, 24, and 5, that'd be 29.
And I know you're making this up for the sake of the training, but let's be honest, if you're the school district that's doing this, like, this has all been detailed, hopefully, in your 470 and your RFP and a contract that you've signed, and you knew from go that this was X year contract with X number of extensions available to you, and all of that. Hopefully you know that, and you're just recording the info that you already have.
Yep. Yeah, this should be information that's readily available to you from your own documentation. Is there a statute, rule, or other restriction which prohibits you from, or prohibits publication of the specific pricing information for this contract? unless you have something fairly unusual, you're going to be clicking no here. I know of no instances where I've seen the yes, but I do know that from talking to folks in other states that if you do click yes, they may ask you for some additional information regarding your response as far as that's concerned, because this is supposed to be, generally speaking, public information. So you may hear from somebody at some point during the review of your application regarding the fact that you have answered yes to this question, if in fact you did. But you would expect to find somewhere in the contract some language that would talk about prohibiting publication of the pricing or other information that's in the contract. And then we'll save and continue. And then last but certainly not least, we'll take a quick review of everything that we've entered so far. We've got all our details listed on here. Everything that we've entered. There's 3 bids, multi-year, voluntary extensions, 29 months. Looks like, yep, everything. There's a copy of the contract. Yep, looks like we're ready to go. So if everything here meets what you expected to see from what you entered, you can click complete. If you click, or if you see something that's wrong, you can use your back button to go back to the page where you entered that and make the correction to it. And then you're ready to click complete. If you click complete, once you do, you will not be able to make changes to this contract. So you want to make sure that you are thorough and complete in everything that you have entered before you click this button, because as I say, you are locked into that contract once you have created it. And then the only thing you can do going forward is view it. So if you made a mistake associated with a particular contract and you realize that that mistake has occurred, you'll want to go ahead and create a new contract. You click manage and then scroll to the bottom and add a new contract. We're not going to go through that process again, but I did want to make sure that you all at least saw that and had an opportunity to see a contract being created. As I go back to this, I'll check in. Jody, any additional questions that have come up?
Yeah, I'm glad you stopped here, Scott, because there is one thing that I want to at least give you a chance to cover. You may hit it later. If you would, before you go into this, go back to the page where you went to the district entity and you had the choices that had the contracts module. I know when I'm talking to districts and show them how to get to this screen that you're going to there, there may be 3 things that I know of I've seen districts use off of this screen. One, Scott just went through the contracts module in some detail. The second, you've probably already done this when you were verifying the discount data, but you can see the district discount rate with the discount rate choice there. And then the question that came up on Go Soapbox, and we can cover this now or perhaps later, a district said, well, help me remember where I would go find my Category 2 budget. They've added this Category 2 budget choice on that page. I don't know how that'll look in the training module, but yeah, for districts wanting to know how to do that, they would click the Get Information, and then for 2021 through 25, you kind of see the forecast there, and in a way to kind of break that down, it would be more populated if you had more schools, obviously, like Scott's showing. But there's some things we can get into there if we need to, either later or in a separate conversation about how that's computed for different schools and different size districts and things like that. But that's where you would find it as far as where you would go to find your Cat 2 budget with this new 5-year period starting. And yeah, so that catches us up on the things in Go Soapbox, Scott. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, that's okay. Great. I'm glad we can do that. All right, and actually this will give you a good example of what, how to get back into the 471. After having left that Form 471, a new task was created. So I just go back to tasks, and you can see that there's the Form 471 I was working on just a little bit ago. So I'll just click on create the Form 471, and we're back into the adding FRNs. I'm going to take a real quick spin through adding an FRN for the networking equipment, since that's somewhat common. That's what I say. Core router is not a continuation. We're not copying. Continue. It's from contract. Continue. Search where associated contract. Search. Yep. We'll use that one. And there it is. There's the start date. Click the end date. Scroll way out. And continue. Now here is where you may recall, this is where it's asking us, does this FRN include requests for networking equipment, which is normally category 2, only now it is category 1 because we are getting a core router that serves up all of our WAN connections. So we're going to say yes here. It's going to ask us, is this associated with least lit, dark, or self-provisioned? In this case, you'd probably be saying either dark or self-provisioned. That core may or may not be under lit. It may. If it is, you click yes. I think more commonly, you're probably going to be looking at dark or self-provisioned, but that's not necessarily the case. A core router that, still yours to deal with even under lit fiber. So if you're lit and you're looking for a new core router, it's still at least partially eligible under C1 if it's doing C1 functions. But notice that when I clicked on it, it gives you some alert text reminding you to create a new FRN for the least lit service recurring charges. Basically, that is the one that we just created a few moments ago. So it's basically just reminding you, hey, this is only going to ask you for information about your networking equipment. It's not going to ask you about the recurring charges that you're going to need, the whole reason why you need this networking equipment as in the first place. So there's a little bit more guidance for you in terms of selecting yes or no. So we said yes, it's for lit fiber. We're going to continue. Did I say special construction or did I say networking equipment? That's fascinating. Fiber, network equipment. Didn't ask me. Okay, just checking. It's been a while since I've been through this. Special construction. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm like you. I thought normally it'd ask you which of the 3 you were filing for, and you had like radio buttons, but maybe it's because you picked lit fiber. I'm not sure.
Yep, that's what I was looking for too. Little odd. Nope. No state match in Kentucky right now. Okay, so now we can create the new FRN line item. Maybe this is where that'll get into that. Data connection between 2 of our houses. Partly. Yep, there we go. Fiber. Fascinating.
Well, this gets back to the premise I was joking about earlier. I'm not positive that a core router would be eligible under a lit fiber scenario. They just assume that, it's either Cat 2 stuff that you bought separately or it's equipment that the provider is included as part of the solution. So that may be why we're in a bit of a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, it could be. Remember that any piece of equipment that serves any ineligible locations or populations, it does require a cost allocation, hence the reason why I entered ineligible cost there, just as an example. Save and continue. Excuse me, trouble this morning. Does it serve all the entities? In this case, yes, it does, because it's core router. And there's our recipient service. Are we sure? Yes, we're sure. And we've added a new FRN line item. Interesting. Interesting. So this save and continue will take us back, and you can see that we've entered that. Now, to Jody's question, I'm going to try this real quick, just to blow through this. No, because I'd like for y'all to be able to see where it asks correctly for information about the router itself rather than fiber. Yes, we're going to try dark fiber this time. Ah, there we go. Yeah, you're right. You're right, Jody. Looks like looks like you'd have trouble getting that core router paid for from C1 under least lit fiber. Under dark fiber, and I know that it works the same way with the self-provision as well, that this option will come up with that.
For the record, I agree with your logic, because even if you've got a lit fiber scenario, you still have some sort of equipment that you're plugging it up to, and I've often wondered why they don't call that Cat 1. But yeah, I think these were the screen you were looking for with the dark fiber self-provision here.
All right, so yeah, you can see there that we've entered that information, and then obviously it needs to be filled in. I'm not going to go through that filling in process because it looks essentially the same as everything else that you've seen so far. But that should give you at least a good sense of where things stand as far as it's concerned. So once you're done adding all of your details regarding the line items for each funding request, and just to make sure this lets us move on, I'm going to remove that. And then you are ready to go to the review process. This is essentially getting ready to end and submit and certify your excuse me, your Form 471. You'll notice that as soon as I click to the option to review, it took me to a page that's letting me know that the PDF is being generated. I'm going to refresh every so often, and I refreshed, and you can see that the PDF now has been generated. You may have to click refresh a couple of times before this shows up. If you have a rather large application, it might be a good time to go grab a cup of coffee before you come in and sit down and click on that refresh button. That way it's had a little bit of time. But you do at this point have the ability to, and you probably should, take a quick look at the application itself. It downloads a copy for you. I'm in Chrome. If I wanted to just open it up, I could open it up from here, take a look at it. This will be your draft copy of the application. It will not be the final version, but it'll give you a chance to look at it and see what it would look like on paper. Once I've reviewed that, and it is a little bit easier to review than using your back button through Epic to see it again. And then I check on that checkbox saying, yep, I've looked at it. It looks like it's correct to me as far as I can figure. I now have the opportunity to either go back and edit my Form 471, or I can send it for certification, or I can continue to certification. This brings us to just being aware that if you click send for certification, this is in an instance where, for example, let's just say that your signatory on all of your E-rate paperwork is always your superintendent. This is where you would send it to them for certification. So you would click send for certification. What it's going to essentially do is take you out of this, and it will place a task in the inbox of everyone in your district who is a full rights user for the Form 471. So if it's more than just you, your superintendent will need to have full rights as a user of the Form 471 in order for them to do the certification process. It will show up as a task in their tasks list that needs certification. So when they log in, after they do, have them click on the tasks button, click the task. When it takes that to them, there's a button up in the upper right-hand corner that will ask them to accept the task. They will have to do that before they can move on to the actual certification process. However, if you are the person who is the signatory on your E-rate forms, then all you need to do is click continue to certification. So we're going to use that as the example right now. And here are our applicant certifications. I certify that I'm not telling a lie, that we are schools, that we don't have big endowments of 50 million or more. We've secured our access separately or through this program to all the resources. We have everything we need. We know that those resources, some of them are not eligible for support. We're following the rules. We're doing what we're supposed to do. We know that we have to pay the non-discounted portion, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, we're going to click on those certifications. And then we get to our funding summary. It shows us all of the requests that we've got in total on this particular funding request. Then it's going to ask you for a total budgeted amount allocated to resources not eligible for E-rate support. This is essentially your technology budget for the district. There's a number of different ways you can do that. If you have a projected budget already for 2021 for the school year, you can enter that here. It does not have to even necessarily be approved at this point. It needs to be projected. You need to have some sort of documentation to support it. The other thing that you can do here, and folks find it fairly easy to do here, is you can enter the amount from your TAR from the previous year. When I say previous year, I mean the previous year. So you'd go back to your TAR from last year and enter that amount here. That's basically just showing a previous year's budget. You will, if you are ever audited, you will be asked to provide an actual budget amount. It may or may not actually match this amount, but your actual budget will have to be something in order to show that you are able to meet the non-discounted share, this 51.54. That your budget's going to have to be bigger than that number in order for you to be able to move on and also to sort of quote unquote pass the test, if you will, to prove that you have the funds available. Let's just say it's 100,000. nice healthy budget. Hopefully the vast majority of you are operating with at least, budgets that aren't on life support, hopefully. Then, are you receiving any of the funds directly from a service provider? If you are going to say truthfully yes to the answer to this question, you might as well just throw this whole form in the trash. Why? Because you are not permitted by E-rate rules to receive any of your funds from the service provider to cover the cost of the non-discounted portion. So if you say yes, you will get, you're basically, your application will be thrown out. You might be asked if that was a mistake first, but if it is not a mistake, then you might as well just go ahead and pack it up and come back next year. Has the service provider assisted you in locating the funds? They are allowed to help you. They are not allowed to provide it for you. So they can help you with a bake sale. They can help you with finding grants or other options that will help you fund. They are allowed to bake cookies for that bake sale, but they are not allowed to provide you with the funds themselves. You might be asked, even if you said yes here, you might still be asked about, well, in what manner did they assist you? So you want to make sure that any documentation that you have clearly shows that they did not provide anything other than the cookies for the bake sale. Then we have additional certifications. Yes, I'm following the 470 rules. I did the competitive bidding the way I'm supposed to. I've complied with all those competitive bidding rules. Yes, we are using all of this for educational purposes. Make sure that you do a quick read through of these certifications because you want to make sure that at least you know what you're swearing or attesting to. But all of these certifications must be checked off before you're going to be able to finish the certified. The only gotcha, so to speak, are these two drop downs, where if you answer those incorrectly, you could get yourself in some trouble as far as getting your funding approved later on down the road. The rest of these are all positive certifications. I certify that, yes, we did this, or we did that, or we're going to, or we understand that I have not allocated eligible or ineligible components as required by the rules, et cetera, et cetera. So all of those check boxes need a check next to them. And then if you are fully ready and you are comfortable with it, it is time to certify. And certifying is the same as submitting. So once you click certify, your 471 will be submitted and it will be certified. You have attested to everything that you need to. We have a little bit of a scare you kind of, ooh, oh no, I shouldn't lie. Well, we should know that we're not supposed to be lying on any of this. But, you could be in trouble civilly or criminally, which has happened to a few people who have acted very badly in the past. So they give you a little warning that, you could be subject to penalty for misrepresenting what's going on in your application and in your school district if you lied on this form. So you do have to click yes, that you understand that that's the case, and then it provides you with a certification confirmation. Yes, you're certified, you are done with this particular Form 471. It gives you your certification date. Couldn't hurt to just quick print this page out. Even though you should be able to go and find that Form 471 elsewhere now, just in case, it can't hurt to have at very least, your Form 471 number written down somewhere so that you could go back to it if you ever found that there was a problem with it. Or worse, it came up missing, which I do know has happened in the past, and in fairly distant past, although we do hear horror stories every year of one or two now and then sort of just randomly disappearing. So don't let that be you. At least make sure that you know what number you're dealing with and perhaps have this certification page printed out or PDF'd for yourselves. So how do we get back to that Form 471? Well, we'll just go back to our landing page. And if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we can then use our landing page search tools to search for that Form 471. I select the 471, the funding year, and you'll note then that the application shows up. And if I want to see the details on it, I click on the number, and it will take, it will take me to the information that we have entered, giving you a look at all of it. You can look at the funding requests. You can review any inquiries that have occurred. If you realize later on down the road that you made a mistake and you would like to correct that mistake, let's say that you entered the wrong cost associated with, or the wrong cost allocation associated with one of your line items, you can click Related Actions and then submit a modification request. This is going to be, this is the way that you would submit that request to make that change. And you do not need to wait for PIA to occur if you know that you have this modification that needs to be made. You can do it right away. If you know that it's needed right away, you simply click on the Submit Modification Request, and then it's going to ask you, does it have to do with the application or does it have to do with an entity? The application is where you would be able to make changes to things like the cost or the associated contract or cost allocations, things of that sort, speeds, line speeds. If you have a funding request, line item that needs to be changed, this application option is the one you want to use. If you have discount data that for whatever reason didn't get entered properly, or it didn't stick when you tried to enter it the first time, and you're just realizing it now, you can make the request to have the entity information changed as well. You would click here, and then it will ask you about which entity, and then it will ask you what information it is that you want to have changed, and then you would submit you would submit that modification request when you are done. Questions, Jody, at this point?
Yeah, I think we're caught up on Go Soapbox, but now that section you were in there about the modification request, when you're talking about changing line items and things like that, just to clarify, you're talking about an application where you've caught something before USAC has funded or denied an application.
That's correct. All of those RAL modifications, those application modifications are pre-decision, pre-funding decision. Anything that, if you notice a mistake that has occurred after you have been funded, you will need to, you'll need to appeal the funding decision in order to request that modification be made. Now that's something where you happen to recognize a mistake, for example, that's where you want to do it that way. You can, if there's a service provider, if you need a spin change, that's something that's completely different, as well as, what's the other one I'm looking for? Spin change.
Well, I know you can do contract expiration date changes and things like that with the Form 500. There's some things you can do after the fact, but the one you were showing earlier and talking about changing line, I think everybody understands that, but just for folks maybe new to this, it's once you've filed an application, typically, certainly once it's been funded, you can't go change the amounts, right? If you were to see an error, as Scott said, there's a way that you might be able to catch that before the reviewers make a final ruling, but once the ruling's been made, that's pretty much what we have, with the only options being to appeal or to make some larger scale changes on a Form 500.
Yeah, and just it's worthy of note with respect to those, when I mentioned the appeal, when you get the funding decision issued, it's going to show up as one of your notifications. It'll let you know in this notifications list that the funding decision is ready to to view and access. When you get that notification, I want to encourage every one of you, and this is learned from hard learned, or this is information that is from hard learned experience, and I throw myself under the bus in saying this. If you do not recognize that there is a mistake in the funding decision, and then it becomes apparent to you that, yes, there was in fact a mistake, but you didn't see that there was a mistake until, let's say, the end of the funding year and you're filing a bear form, or your service provider is filing a SPI, and then you realize the mistake was made and you didn't catch it, you're now going to not only have to appeal, but before you appeal, you are going to have to go to the FCC and request a waiver of the rule that limits you to 60 days to appeal a funding decision, or for that matter, any decision that USAC makes. So save yourself headache and heartache and time, and make sure that you take a few minutes after every decision that USAC ever makes, whether it's a funding decision or it's a decision on, if you filed a Form 500 and they make a modification to your application, or you file a Form 500, or you file a service substitution, that's the one I was thinking of, or a spin change. When they do that, they issue you a revised funding commitment decision letter. Check those over in detail, and I do mean down to the penny kind of detail, to make sure that nothing got changed that you didn't want changed, and we've had that occur as well. Don't just assume that because you submitted it correctly that what got changed is still correct. Make sure you review those funding commitment decisions, those revised funding commitment decisions. Make sure that they are correct down to the letter, because you can put yourself in a very, very difficult and frustrating situation going forward if you don't.
Well, that's a great point. I had a district that got nailed with that a few years ago, where they had filed for essentially a dark fiber connection and like a network core router that we talked about earlier. And the reviewer, for whatever reason, read through the application and said, hey, it looks like this needs to be, lit fiber. And the district, just thinking, well, I really just want to get that funded. That's a large funding commitment. Said, sure, change it, whatever. And then lo and behold, a month later, they come back and deny the networking components, because they said, well, you can't get network components on a lit fiber type arrangement. Well, I didn't file for that. You wanted me to change it. And so then it led to a whole appeals process. It was quite the mess.
Yeah, and if you don't catch it within that first 60 days, then it becomes even messier. All righty, let's do a quick run through, and I'll see if I can make this as quick as possible here on a Category 2 application.
The only other thing, I'd done a quick poll just to see what people are interested in. I know we've got folks that might be doing Cat 2 services off of something that they bid for locally, like UPS's or cabling project or whatever, and there might be people interested in a Cat 2 application based on something that would be like off of a networking components contract at the state level. So you might, when you get to that screen, you might show the difference in where they would grab that contract information, et cetera.
Sure. School district, yep, that's good. These are basically those review pages. So we can zip through these. Request a discount, we can zip through that as well. And we're going to add our first funding request. Enter the nickname, blah, blah. But we'll make sure we put C2 on there so that we all know. Is it continuation? No, it is not. Service type, internal connections. If we're on contract, is it on contract? We'll go with that state contract example. All right, so when we go to associated contract, there's two options you'll have in order to reference the state contract that you're ultimately going to use on your Form 471 when it comes to this Category 2 and the networking equipment. You can either go into the contracts module and create one, and then when it says is it based on another applicant, you would, or is based on a state master contract, you would say yes. And then you enter all the details into it about the state contract from the state contract matrix, which we will be distributing as soon as we have that networking equipment information. Well, we've got those contracts. Once we've got those contracts in place, we will definitely get out right away the contract matrix so that you have that information. But on the contract matrix, there's the answers to all the questions, so that if you wanted to create a contract instance or an instance of that contract in your own contract module, you can do that, and that's not a problem. You are certainly allowed to do that. There's nothing that's going to prevent you from doing that. The other option that you would have is to, when you get to this point in your Form 471, you can search on the state's build entity number, which is 128821. You might want to make a note of that. We'll repeat it just like they do in commercials. That number again, 128821. If you search on that in the actual Form 471, if you click search, it will bring up a list of all of the state's contracts that we have created in our contracts module. They will show up here. You will carefully make sure that you select the correct contract that matches up with your service provider, and make sure that it matches up with the correct set of years of the contract, because, and I say that because when you search on the state's number, it's going to bring up a list of all of the state's available contracts, which is going to include the contracts that are expiring now or will expire at the end of this funding year. So you want to make sure that you correctly select the contract that applies to the upcoming years, not the past ones. But that is how you would do that. You'd enter the 128821, and then you would click search. And what was the other number? Was it 148?
Might have been 178.
Was it 178? And then click search. So I'm just going to use this. Oops, that was not necessary. There we go.
Well, and as you pointed out, right, I mean, if I were filing off of a cabling project that I intend to do locally, or some UPSs that I did a local bid on, I'm going to have a contract module that I had already entered in. It's going to look just like the search that Scott just did. The only difference being, if I were buying something off of, say, like a state networking contract, I would enter the other build entity that Scott mentioned, which will not appear by default. So you can search off the state's build entity and find the right contract module to reference.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I'm putting in bare bones, and you would want to put in your narrative a little bit more detail about the WAPs and switches, what you're trying to do. You're building out your wireless infrastructure, blah, 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 blah. Make sure that you do, in fact, add a little bit of detail there, so that your PIA reviewer is going to be able to pretty quickly identify that, yes, what you are doing and how you're doing it makes those items E-rate eligible. So we're going to save and add. It's going to take us directly to our line items. We'll add a line item. Type of internal connection. And I say WAPs, data distribution.
Like data distribution or wireless data, yeah.
Yeah. Now there we go. Router and switch. I said switches, so we'll say that switches. Here you'll select your provider of choice. I'm just going to say other because it is vendor neutral from our perspective. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you'd enter the actual make and model. Is installation included in the price? If it is, click yes. If it is separately priced, you would say no, and then you'll enter it as an installation as a separate line item. If it's no, let's go ahead and say no for that for now. No, we are not leasing it. If you are, you would say yes. It's going to ask you later on for different information about that, but I think most of you probably are not leasing. Monthly recurring costs. Well, we're probably not going to have monthly recurring costs on switches. So here we've got zeros. And on the one-time cost, we will actually have, excuse me, we will actually have dollars. Note again, if you are purchasing a piece of equipment that serves non-eligible locations or populations, you will need to make an allocation, a cost allocation associated with that. So if the switch that you're getting it serves up for pre-K, for example, you may have to pull out, $15 worth of, or $12 worth, 1%, 2%. We can say 24. It's 2%. And then the quantity. Now, much like the fiber lines that I was talking about in terms of the need to have separate line items, the same thing you will want to have with respect to your equipment as well. If you have some equipment that is not going to have cost allocation associated with it, you can put those all on the same line item. Basically, it's going to be the same. So let's say you're getting 5 switches, and all 5 of them are the exact same switch, but one of them is going to serve a pre-K location. Do one line item that's associated with that one location, and it has a cost allocation. Then do a separate line item with the other 4 locations associated with it, and no cost allocation associated with it. Make sense? I certainly hope so. And if you have questions about that, drop it in Go Soapbox and Jody can let me know. Same thing would apply if you had multiple different makes and models, even if it comes from the same manufacturer. Like models and pricing can go together on a single line item, but you cannot mix them within a single line item. So just be aware that you may have to be creating a number of line items to get through a full list of networking equipment that you are purchasing. No, say school A, add, are we sure it's school A? Yes, we're sure. And we're back to our line items. So if I wanted to add a different one, let's see if we had wireless data distribution, yeah, because I said WAPs previously, access points, make, other jobs. By typing 1, 2, 3, 4. No, it's not a lease. No, installation is not included. And then our zeros for our monthly cost. Party. We might be doing 6 of these, and then save and continue. Whoops, see, and I forgot. Even requires you to enter units on that, not just the zeros. We'll say yes in this case, and save and continue. And save and continue again. And we're back at our wireless data distribution. The other thing that you'll need to be aware of when you go into these is that you will not be including in the cost, if you have it all broken out, and I think in most cases you will need to well, maybe not. When did that happen?
What are we searching for?
I'm looking for the taxes and fees.
Oh, good point. Yeah, I know you see that on the Cat 1
it's miscellaneous. Yep, I forgot. Your miscellaneous taxes and fees, installation and activation. You noted on that previous line item that I said installation is not included. If you have a separate cost on your quotes for installation versus the price, you will need to do a separate line item for your installation. Same thing with taxes and fees. You need a separate line item for those. So the way to get access to this drop down that lets you put in installation, taxes and fees, and training cost. And by the way, that training cost is training only, very specifically only for that particular product. You are allowed to get training on those products, but it has to be only for that specific product. So just be aware that if you do select that training and you're going to be paying for some training, that training has to be only for the operation of that specific product. Okay, so yeah, I have the miscellaneous as part of my drop down to then give me access in the type of product to installation, activation, and initial config, or the taxes and fees. Let's say installation. This is, again, I'm going to give that make and model. Or is installation included in the installation? Yes, it is. Click no on the lease agreement. Probably not. If it is lease, let us know. We can walk you through that. It's monthly.
I will tell you, we did get a question while you're kind of typing that out, Scott.
Yeah.
And it's a fair question. I've not seen this one come up yet, but it said, should a district consider a certain amount of ineligible cost based on like public usage? So I'm envisioning, say, like you put some access points in the gymnasium, and there's a ball game, and people are getting on your wireless. Now, to me, I mean, you're certifying that these are primarily for educational purposes, and so, you know, theoretically, you're putting those out there for instructional access in those areas, and it's almost just kind of ancillary when all this other stuff happens. That's not why you put them in. If you don't feel like you can say that with some certainty, then there might be a need to put some ineligible on there. But your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. It will depend in large part on what it's serving and what its primary purpose is. If, as you say, that primary purpose is for instruction and access by the students during instructional time, then even though you might be putting wireless access points in a gym and people might be hitting them during basketball games, that is considered ancillary use, and it is allowable without the requirement of cost allocation. If, on the other hand, for example, you're putting those wireless access points in a building where there is both an eligible population and an ineligible population, then you will need to do some cost allocation for example, the 3 rooms in your high school that are set aside for adult ed. You will need to make some sort of cost allocation as far as that's concerned.
And just to state the really extreme example, like if I'm literally putting a few access points in the bleachers at the football stadium because I want to offer access to the public while I've got football games going on, and there's really no instructional intent at all, then maybe it just doesn't show up in your E-rate application. You just buy those few APs out of pocket.
That's what I would suggest, yes. All righty, so we've saved and continued. Excuse me. Are we sure of those? Yes, we are sure of those, and we're back to our line items. Same thing will be gone for taxes and fees. You use that initial, the internal connection type as miscellaneous, and then you can put in your taxes and fees associated with each of the purchases that you have planned. Questions, comments, concerns? I know we're just a few minutes past our originally scheduled time, but certainly not a problem. We can stick around and answer questions if folks still have them. And then obviously tomorrow we have the office hours from 10 to 12, and then office hours addition again on
Yeah, like early afternoon.
1 to 3. Yeah,
Friday afternoon. Yep.
Do you see any additional questions, Jody?
Not the one thing, the one I just threw in there about the, would you consider ineligible cost on some public usage type scenarios? I mean, we, weren't many questions, and that's kind of understandable. I mean, just like when we were doing these region by region, a lot of times people just kind of want to, get their minds refreshed. We go through the process. They're following along, hopefully, in their own application. Yeah. And, for these very district-specific situations, that's why we got the office hours. We've got, the ability, as Scott mentioned, catch him via Teams. We can schedule some things. Matter of fact, I've got 1 or 2 things I've got to follow up with him on with a couple of districts that I know about their, kind of sort of individual scenarios. And he's willing to help, any of you. And, I'm certainly willing to step in as well as needed. And that's why we have these. If you've got any final, okay, so with the Cat 2 budgets now being a district-wide allocation, do districts have to specify the entity where the items will be installed? I'll let you take that one. I think I know the answer, Scott. But
I don't know if you caught that, but as I went through that last section, it does ask you for which buildings are recipients of those services. What it doesn't ask you to do is break it down. So you may have a purchase of 6 access points, and you're going to put 2 in one building and 4 in another, but they're all the same cost and they're all the same make and model. You can, as you go through that, simply indicate that those are the 2 buildings that you're going to be including those in. What it won't ask you is for how many go to each building. So it's partially yes and partially no. Partially yes, in that they will ask you which buildings are going to be recipients of service. They won't ask you to break down how many, nor will they ask you to worry about the cost associated with each building and how you divvy up that cost because it's no longer a building budget.
And I would say they still probably ask because it's almost like forcing you to acknowledge that Category 2 is still only eligible for your instructional facilities, right? And so Scott had to check. If you notice that list, he had his 2 schools there. If I want to buy APs for my, Board of Education or transportation building or somewhere that doesn't serve students, like those are not eligible. And so, at least it forces you to pick those schools when you're adding those line items on your application, right?
Right. Anything else from the soapbox?
Yeah, I think we're caught up on questions there. Somebody better enter something quickly, otherwise we'll just we'll convene again via some of the office hours and via other opportunities as needed. And again, I know Scott will say the same, but I appreciate everybody sticking with us today. This is not the most exciting material, but it's certainly very critical. A lot of dollars at stake. We need people to understand it, and that's why we dedicate so many resources to try to make sure that that districts feel like they've got some backup and got some assistance and got some avenues to get questions answered if things come up. So certainly appreciate them, and Scott, appreciate you and Caprice and the folks up there dedicating some time to this.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's as I've said many times, it's the part of the position that I really enjoy the most is providing that assistance to you all. So, with that, thank you, Jody. Do appreciate your time and your contributions, as well as our colleagues Rebecca and Caprice, and Megan and Andrew. all very much appreciated that you were able to stop by. And Megan and Andrew, thank you very much for your doing what you do to make this possible for everybody else out there. And for you all, CIOs, DTCs, other folks that work on E-rate, thank you so very much for attending. And as Jody said, please don't hesitate to drop in one of the next 2 days. Ping me on Teams anytime. And hopefully another year from now, we'll be able to get back into the swing of at least being able to see each other face to face as we go through this process. But in the meantime, I bid you all a fantastic and successful E-rate season, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye.